There comes a moment in every woman's life when something inside her becomes crystal clear. A moment when the exhaustion of chasing what does not want to be caught outweighs the temporary thrill of pursuit. It is a quiet yet defining moment, a pause in which she finally asks, "What if true seduction isn't in what I do, but in what I stop doing?" This shift is not about apathy or indifference. It's about reclaiming emotional sovereignty. It's about realizing that power isn't in forcing a connection. It's in cultivating a presence so magnetic, so rooted that connection naturally forms around it. This message is for you, the woman who is ready to stop convincing and start attracting, who is done being the one who insists and is now becoming the one who simply is, the one who no longer seeks to conquer but to evoke, to awaken something in another, not by reaching for them, but by being so grounded in her essence that she becomes unforgettable. At the center of this transformation lies an ancient philosophy often misunderstood as cold or masculine, Stoicism. But when applied through the lens of feminine energy, Stoicism is not the absence of feeling. It is the art of emotional refinement. The woman who learns to master this, who practices emotional restraint not as denial, but as alchemy, becomes an experience, not a performance. Seneca said, "Mastering oneself is the greatest power of all." And what happens when that self-mastery becomes emotional language? When it becomes the rhythm of her voice, the stillness in her gaze, the precision of her words, everything changes. Her presence begins to speak before she even opens her mouth. Her energy enters the room before her feet do. Why? Because she no longer acts from need, but from choice. That distinction, though invisible, is felt, especially by emotionally attuned or dominant men. Carl Jung wrote in Man and His Symbols that the male psyche is naturally drawn to the feminine symbol, not just a body or beauty, but a deeper representation, mystery, intuition, emotional potency. This means that when a woman fully embodies presence, she becomes a living symbol. And symbols aren't explained, they are felt. So many women are conditioned to think that seduction is about what you show, what you say, what you give. But men don't fall in love just with a body. They fall for what they feel when a woman looks at them. Like she sees something no one else can. That kind of gaze cannot be faked. It comes from emotional depth, from self-knowledge, from restraint used with intention. That's why today we're not talking about seductive tricks or charming lines. We're going deeper, into the art of provoking desire without pursuing it, into the grace of touching a man's ego without stroking it, into the mystery of becoming a woman who lingers in his psyche long after she has left the room. Because here's the truth. Most women try to impress, but the woman who leaves an impact, she speaks little, but with intention. She reacts less and chooses more. Her every word is curated not from manipulation, but from inner stillness. This is the beginning of a different kind of seduction. A woman who is stoic is not robotic. She is emotionally intelligent. She knows when to lean in and when to lean back. She understands that not everything must be said, and not every silence needs to be filled. She lets the pauses breathe. She lets the energy rise on its own. The difference between a woman who reacts and one who responds is subtle but powerful, and men feel that difference, especially emotionally confident men who are attuned to energy, not just appearances. Stoicism teaches one of the most attractive truths of all. You cannot control what happens outside of you, but you can always choose how to interpret it, how to feel it, and how to act. Now imagine you're on a date. He says something ambiguous. Maybe it rubs you the wrong way. The reactive woman jumps in, explains herself, defends her value, tries to correct him or prove something. But the stoic woman, she pauses. She looks at him with a soft, knowing gaze. Perhaps she even smiles slightly. And then, when she finally speaks, it's a single phrase. Simple, precise, emotionally grounded. That moment, that pause, speaks more than 1,000 words. Why? Because she did not hand him her emotional reins. She didn't need to. She was already in control of them. That is the magnetism of a woman who owns her center. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. In the realm of attraction, that strength becomes a silent current men can't ignore. A woman who doesn't chase, who doesn't justify, who doesn't over-explain her emotions, who knows when to let silence hold the tension. That is a woman who begins to summon rather than seek. This is not about manipulation. This is about transformation from within. It's about emotional self-control as a path to self-respect. When a woman becomes aware of her feelings, but chooses how to express them, not out of fear or impulse, but from alignment, she becomes magnetic in a way that no physical feature alone can replicate. This is what makes her unforgettable. Jung explained in Symbols of Transformation that the male unconscious is drawn to what it cannot fully possess, to what awakens a longing without satisfying it too quickly. This is the psychic dance between the desire to own and the fascination with what remains free. A woman who is emotionally anchored does not need to resist or seduce through external tactics. Her calm, her restraint, her command over her inner world, they do the work for her. She is not trying to win him. She's letting him experience her. And in that experience, he finds something rare. A woman who is moved by nothing except her own truth. She is not cold. She is dangerous. Not because she threatens, but because she doesn't need to chase or charm. Her stillness is louder than noise. Her silence more evocative than compliments. She's the woman who leaves a man wondering long after the night is over. Not because she tried, but because she didn't need to. She didn't react. She chose. And that choice, made calmly, intentionally, and with emotional clarity, is what makes all the difference. When a woman chooses to operate from her emotional center, rather than her emotional impulses, everything about her changes. Not only how she speaks, but how she is perceived. In a world where attention is scattered and everyone is reacting to everything, presence becomes a form of power. And a woman who embodies that presence, calm, confident, and emotionally clear, becomes magnetic without effort. She no longer needs to explain herself, because the way she moves, speaks, and listens already says everything. Her seduction is not loud. It's not performative. It's not made of words meant to please or impress. Her seduction is silent, intentional, and woven into every gesture. Her gaze, her tone, her rhythm, and all of that is born from one simple truth. She no longer speaks to be liked. She speaks to be felt. This is the core of emotional language. Think of emotional language as the art of saying less, but meaning more. It's the discipline of choosing your words, like you'd choose an ingredient. In a rare perfume, precisely, sparingly, and for its lasting effect. Because men don't remember everything you say, but they do remember how they felt when you said it. And that feeling is created by subtext. What's beneath your words? Not just the words themselves. Let's break this down. There are 3 essential components to powerful emotional communication. 1. Tone. Soft, steady, slow, and confident. 2. Gaze. Anchored, present, slightly ambiguous. 3. Intention. Not to get, but to give an experience. Most women rush to fill silence because silence makes them anxious. But a stoic woman understands that silence is where energy builds. She allows it to breathe. She does not fear the space between sentences. She uses it. Because she knows, sometimes, what is left unsaid lingers longer than anything that is spoken. Jung once wrote that symbols are not invented, they are experienced. When a man encounters a woman who speaks from emotional clarity and restraint, he doesn't just hear her, he experiences her. She becomes a symbol of something deeper, something mysterious, something felt in the body before it is understood in the mind. That's why emotional seduction begins not in the phrase itself, but in the pause before it. Imagine you're in front of a man. He expects the usual, over-explaining, laughter that seeks approval, a script he's heard before. But instead, you speak differently. You don't rush. You don't try. You look at him with stillness. You say less, but every word is chosen. And suddenly he feels something shift. He leans in, not because you asked him to, but because you've created an emotional vacuum he wants to step into. That is the art of subtext. That is emotional leadership. And this is where feminine stoicism becomes irresistible, because it teaches you not just how to control what you say, but how to control the energy behind what you say. It's not about repressing your emotion, it's about refining it, choosing not to speak from need but from awareness, not from lack but from choice. A reactive woman speaks to be understood. A stoic woman speaks to provoke something that doesn't need to be explained. Let's look at a few examples. Instead of saying, "I really like you," she might simply look at him and say, "There's something about you I find hard to ignore." That phrase does more than express, it opens. It creates a question inside him. What is it she sees? Why can't she ignore it? Instead of saying, "I miss you," she might say, "Something about today felt quieter than usual." It's not needy, it's evocative. It doesn't beg for attention. It inspires curiosity. Instead of saying, "I want you to kiss me," she could look at him in silence, then say, "If I kissed you right now, I wonder if you'd stop me." That line doesn't ask, it plays. It dances at the edge of control. It lets him feel the pull, but not the guarantee. And the reason these phrases work isn't just in their cleverness. It's in how they're delivered. With intention, from a calm, emotionally rooted place. If spoken with anxiety, they fall flat. If spoken with grounded presence, they become unforgettable. This is why emotional mastery isn't about pretending. It's not about manipulating or acting. It's about knowing yourself so well that you become selective with your energy. You don't give your attention to anyone or anything that hasn't earned the privilege. And that selectivity is what makes you magnetic. Jung wrote in The Psychology of the Transference that every human interaction is layered with unconscious projections. What you feel about someone is rarely just about them. It's also about the hidden parts of you. A woman who understands this doesn't just seduce others. She understands how she herself is triggered, moved, and reflected in others. And from that awareness, she becomes a master of her own language. Not only what she says, but what she causes. Because here's the truth. A man doesn't fall for a woman just because she's beautiful or kind or even loving. He falls for the version of himself he feels in her presence. He falls for the way her emotional energy makes him feel confident, curious, awakened, desired, alive. And the woman who knows how to guide that emotional experience through words, pauses, silences, and subtext becomes the experience itself. She is no longer a participant in the seduction. She is the seduction. So remember this. When you speak, ask yourself not, "Will he like this?" but "What will he feel when I say this?" When you pause, ask yourself not, "Is he waiting for me to speak?" but "What tension am I allowing to rise?" When you look at him, ask not, "Will he notice me?" but "What am I revealing about my energy in this gaze?" This is emotional language. This is feminine stoicism in action. And this is what separates a forgettable moment from one that echoes inside a man long after it has passed. He may not remember every detail of what you said, but he will remember the moment he looked at you and felt something shift in his chest, something quiet, undeniable, and impossible to name. That is your power. By now you understand. Emotional seduction is not about what you show, how loud you are, or how much you give. It's about what you choose not to do. It's about who you are being beneath every word, every pause, every look. But many women, despite their potential, sabotage their own magnetism. Not because they lack beauty, charm, or intelligence, but because they operate from the wrong emotional place. Let's talk about the most common emotional mistakes that quietly destroy feminine presence and how to correct them from within. 1. Acting from lack instead of power. This is the most common and the most subtle. You may not say, "Please choose me," but everything in your tone, speed, and body language whispers it. Acting from lack means needing validation. It means performing. It means trying to prove you're worthy. The energy of trying is heavy. It's felt in a rushed laugh, in oversharing, in responding too quickly, in asking for clarity too early. And when a man feels it, even if he doesn't consciously recognize it, something inside him withdraws. Not because he's cruel, but because desire cannot grow in pressure. Power, on the other hand, is silent. A woman in her power doesn't rush to be understood. She doesn't beg to be chosen. She knows what is meant for her will not require her to chase it. She speaks not to seek approval, but to express energy. She gives, not to impress, but to offer experience. And because she doesn't act from emotional hunger, everything she says tastes richer, lands deeper, and lingers longer. 2. Using powerful phrases without timing or intention. A beautiful phrase said at the wrong time is like perfume sprayed in a storm. Its effect is lost. Emotional language requires emotional space. Saying something like, "There's something about you that throws me off center," works only when there's already tension. Eye contact, shared silence. If you rush to say it through text, or drop it casually with an emoji, it loses its weight. The phrase is not magic, the container you place it in is. That container is made of pauses, presence, and emotional buildup. Never use emotionally charged phrases from a place of fear or strategy. Use them when your energy is still, when your gaze is steady, when your intention is to create a moment, not to get a reaction. That's the difference between a phrase that seduces and one that falls flat. 3. Overexposing yourself emotionally. Vulnerability is powerful, but only when used with discernment. Sharing emotions doesn't mean unloading your entire emotional history. It doesn't mean confessing trauma too early. It doesn't mean saying, "I miss you" on the third date because the silence makes you nervous. That's not vulnerability. That's emotional overflow. And while it may seem authentic, what it often creates is confusion. Why? Because attraction doesn't thrive in chaos. It thrives in contrast. A woman who is warm, but measured, open but mysterious, expressive but composed. That's the kind of emotional balance that draws men in, not out of pity, but out of respect and fascination. So share, but do it by choice, not compulsion. Speak not to be rescued, but to connect. And always ask, am I revealing this from my wound or from my wisdom? 4. Talking too much, too quickly, and without rhythm. Words are powerful, but too many dilute the message. Many women try to create connection by constantly filling the space, by explaining everything, by apologizing for pauses, by narrating their thoughts. But silence is not your enemy. It is your canvas. The woman who understands this doesn't fear quiet moments. She lets them stretch. She lets her presence do the talking. She doesn't explain every emotion. She lets him feel the undercurrent behind her eyes. When you speak, imagine your words as drops of honey, slow, deliberate, potent, not a stream but a drip. Your voice becomes a rhythm, a vibration, something he starts to feel in his chest. Because men don't remember endless chatter. They remember a phrase that haunted them, a pause that made them wonder, a look that left a question. 5. Being too available emotionally or energetically. Desire needs mystery. Mystery needs space, and space requires restraint. When you're always available, always responding, always showing up, there's no room for him to move toward you. Emotionally strong men, especially, don't desire what's handed to them too easily. They want to feel something rare, something they must rise into. That doesn't mean playing games, it means holding your center. You don't reply just because he texts. You don't chase him down for clarity. You don't over-nurture or try to prove you're safe. You let him feel your absence just as powerfully as your presence. The woman who is centered doesn't punish. She doesn't manipulate. She simply understands. My energy is a privilege, not a guarantee. And that belief, when lived, not just spoken, makes her unforgettable. Becoming the unforgettable woman. So what does this woman look like? Not in her clothes, not in her physical beauty, but in her emotional rhythm. She speaks slowly. She lets her eyes linger a little longer. She lets her silences stretch, because she knows how to hold emotional tension. She doesn't need to rush anything, because she trusts her presence is enough. She doesn't over-explain, because she knows her value isn't in her resume. It's in her energy. She reveals only what she chooses, when she chooses. And that discernment makes every word, every smile, every glance carry emotional gravity. She is the woman who doesn't just say beautiful things. She becomes a beautiful feeling. Jung wrote in The Psychology of the Unconscious, that every person emits a psychic energy that affects others on a deep level. This woman's energy doesn't shout, it radiates. She doesn't need to say, "I'm confident." She simply is. And that presence is felt before anything else. That's the woman men remember, not because she did the most, but because when they were with her, they felt the most. And that is the final truth of emotional seduction. It's not about saying everything perfectly. It's about cultivating the inner world from which you speak. Your tone, your stillness, your gaze, your timing, your why. Because in the end, men don't fall for the woman who tries the hardest. They fall for the one who makes them feel something they can't explain, who speaks like a whisper, but leaves a roar inside them.